cure for this one.
Welcome to episode number 3 of the Max's MuscleTV podcast. I am Scott Goble, and I'm joined once again by my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. Luke Schembri. How are you, Luke?
Scotty, how you doing, mate? I can't believe we've made it back for episode 3. We're on a roll.
We are on a roll for us. Yes, we're much more diligent this time around. A little bit more planning and foresight has gone into this. But we are looking forward to presenting another very valuable topic for our listeners. And those of you that have got a lot out of the first couple of episodes, we plan on bringing lots of topical information to you guys over the coming weeks. And we'd love it if you could support the show by liking and subscribing. This week, we have got the topic of meal prep, Luke, because a lot of our clients, or I would hazard to say, the vast majority, if not all of our clients, in order to achieve their goals, need some sort of nutritional accountability and an ability to measure both their energy intake and their macro breakdown to a degree. So if we are talking meal prep, Luke, how did you go about it? I'm just interested. Back in your heyday, I imagine things are a little bit different now, but back in the heyday, how would you tackle a week of eating when you're, smashing 5,000 calories a day?
Mate, foot-long subs, double chicken. Hey, Subway used to be pretty good. Subway was pretty good back in the day. It's gone downhill.
Has Subway actually gone downhill, or is your palate just probably elevated since then, Luke?
Hey, there you go. It could be the case.
Yes.
Mate, I think I've done absolutely everything. Like, from batch cooking individual meals, trying to make it work with takeaway. I think one of the most, under-considered aspects when it comes to bodybuilding or just improving your composition really comes down to the effort you got to put in with your nutrition. It's a relentless beast. Even to this day, it is still difficult to get meal prep done, especially with kids and other family members. It's just been a never-ending beast. So I've literally tried everything, mate, from cooking food up a few days in advance, cooking meals fresh. You name it. It's just a never-ending beast. I don't think there's any particularly easy way around it. But like you said, it's absolutely critical. I mean, if you want to stay on top of what you're consuming and have some understanding of your calorie and macro targets, then you need to be on top of meal prep, because takeaway is not a real option if you're serious. It's not sustainable either. So, mate, meal prep has been huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah, I remember back when I was competing, I was a diligent meal prepper year round. Like I would, probably because I was poor, to be completely honest. Like I literally could not afford to eat out on a regular basis. I needed to prep my own food, and I needed to find the, cheapest factory grown chicken breasts and, bulk buy my bags of rice and do all this sort of stuff to keep an eye on the budget. We were home brand tuna all the way back then. But I remember just being astounded that other people weren't like that. I remember when bodybuilders came down to train in my gym or do a guest pose, and they were just like, where can I get some food around here? And everywhere I went, I used to carry a meal bag with me. I was kind of that sort of bodybuilding tragic. So I was incredibly diligent, but it was incredibly basic at the same time. It was literally flavors were either barbecue sauce or tomato sauce. And barbecue sauce goes with chicken and tomato sauce goes with red meat. I'm not sure if you're up on that, Luke, but that's how it has to be done. And then it was just either bulked prepared rice or pasta purely for budgetary constraints, and then frozen veg. That was my life back in the day. And it was cheap and it was effective and it did the job.
I think chicken and rice and some basic form of veggies, that was literally the extent of my diet with meal prep. Like I was pretty much exclusive to that. I just got into a good routine. One thing that I did enjoy was when I was a firefighter, and if there was no jobs, I was allowed to do pretty much whatever around the fire station. So a decent part of my meal prep was done while I was getting paid as a firefighter, which was always good. It was always a bit of a problem if the bells went off and I was halfway through a cook and we had to get in the truck. But, getting paid to do meal prep was something that was very helpful. Mate, I do remember how serious you took meal prep. You actually inspired me for one of the FitXs down in Melbourne. I thought, if Scotty's packing his food everywhere, I'm going to pack it as well. I think it was in 2012. And, mate, I took down 1 kilo of cooked chicken thigh, and I was just eating that throughout the bodybuilding contest, just watching it. And you were my inspiration, because I do remember how you used to take your meal prep.
Yeah, it was kind of sad, Luke. Like I was thinking, my carry-on luggage, the carry-on luggage was food, and the other bag had to be checked. You know, no matter where I went, that was just how I rolled. And you get a lot of strange looks when you go airport security and they scan your bag and it's just full of Tupperware containers. But
I'm sure
yeah,
it was interesting for you as well with any relationships that you're in as well at the time. You know, oh, Scott's got his meal container again. Let's go for a romantic feed, and Scott's got his meal container.
Yeah, so romance was not my forte back then, nor is it now, to be fair. So yeah, these days, my meal prep is very little. I did go on a streak where I think I probably ate about 200 lunches at the gym. That was a can of tuna, a microwavable cup of rice, and a 150-gram bag of steamed fresh veg. I think I would have had just that many meals of that. And eventually I moved from the tuna in oil to the tuna in chili oil just to spice it up. But I guess you can say that I've got an incredibly boring and a palate that is quite suitable for bodybuilding, because I've just got no issue with repetitive eating. Like, people used to tell me they get sick of chicken, and I'm like, I could not tell you how many hundreds or probably thousands of kilos of chicken breast I've consumed, and it's still fine. Like, I just don't have an issue with it. But I think I'm probably the anomaly rather than the other way around, to be fair.
So what are you doing nowadays with your food, Scotty? Are you still prepping food individually, or taking individual meals, or what's your meal prep look like?
It's almost non-existent. If there's leftovers from dinner the day before, I might bring that to the gym for lunch. But otherwise, I'm across the street to the Berkeley Square and getting some sushi or something similar. So I'm pretty bad these days. And every now and then I sort of look at it and I'm just like, man, the amount of money I spend on food is ridiculous, like absolutely ridiculous. And then if you throw in a couple of Uber Eats and things like that with the family, you're just like, man, we've got a $200, $250 food budget here easily on top of the food budget, the grocery shop, which is, you know, however much else. So it's kind of ridiculous. And, you know, we're trying to save up at the moment for a big house reno. So I've sort of committed to start prepping food a little bit more, because I literally could probably save $100 a week comfortably, I think, if I avoid the, you know, sushi lunches and things like that. So I guess that's one of the main advantages of prepping your food, is the cost effectiveness of it. If you are looking to buy it on a regular basis, man, you go through some cash, especially if you're a bodybuilder that has some high calorie requirements. The other advantage I would suggest from prepping, if you do so efficiently, would just be the fact that it saves you a lot of time. Like, none of us, or I'd highly doubt any of our listeners, are full-time professional bodybuilders that are living at home and living off their, you know, YouTube subsidies and their sponsor payments, and they can cook each meal fresh. We've all got responsibilities and things, even more so than we did back in the day. So from a time perspective, if you're an efficient meal prepper, that's going to be a huge advantage to you as opposed to cooking things fresh. In terms of the actual bodybuilding pure benefits rather than the lifestyle benefits, it's just that accuracy, isn't it? Like, you can dictate exactly what you're having.
Mate, you can completely control everything, which is probably the main value that comes from meal prep in terms of a performance point of view. But you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Cost savings and time efficiency, they're the big winners. I mean, if you're leaving it to the last minute to think about what you're going to eat, it's going to take you more time each meal to, you know, maybe go across the road and go to the shopping center. If you did that for every single meal, you're going to spend a lot of extra money. And it just becomes very inefficient over time. Like, even to this day, I will still do with the family a pretty decent meal prep on Sunday, and a fairly decent midweek meal prep. And there's just no other way forward. It's how we save money. It's time efficient. And look, the one thing about meal prep I'll say is this. The hardest part is the meal prep itself. You know, going to the shops, getting the food, actually doing the meal prep. Like, if you're eating the same amount of meals across the whole week, whether you're meal prepping or whether you're just leaving it to the last minute to actually organise that meal, then you're going to find that, you know, you can save so much time, effort and energy by meal prepping in advance. And the hardest thing is just doing that meal prep, setting that maybe hour and a half or hour aside, maybe on a weekend, and then, you know, during the week. But once the meals are prepped, like, how easy is life? You know, everything flows. You hit your nutritional targets. You save money. So it's that one big catch. It's just the initial payment that you have to make with meal prep in terms of time that a lot of people struggle to get their head around, myself included. But it ends up costing you more time and more money if you're leaving it to the last minute to prepare each meal or buy takeaway.
100% agree. And I would say one of the unsung benefits is actual adherence. Like the vast majority of my clients, if they go off plan, especially if they've got, say, a semi-flexible macro-based approach, they go off plan when they are caught out, when they are hungry, when they are desperate for food, and they're perhaps restricted in their choices. So if you're walking around a food court trying to get something that's going to match your macros, you're already in trouble, especially if you're ravenous hungry. You're far more likely to overeat. Whereas if you have your meal ready to go, there's no room for error there. Like it's just easy to eat it, and you don't have to get to that point where you're absolutely ravenous hungry. So I think it's just smart regardless of your approach. And I say this to my clients all the time: planning and preparation is the key to your nutritional success, no matter what nutritional intervention you are utilizing. So if you're a macro-based approach, man, planning and preparation is going to make that so much easier. If you're on a food plan, then planning and preparation is essential. But you can be doing carnivore, you can be doing keto, you can be doing paleo. It does not matter. If you're not planning and preparing for advance, man, you're making your life so much more difficult. So when it comes to prepping for food, I guess prepping your food for your bodybuilding goals, I guess the first thing we have to do is quantify what your goals are and what your nutritional requirements may be. So obviously, at the top of the list is calorie intake. You need to know how many calories you are going to consume. Now, do you have a generic macro split for your clients, Luke? Like if you get someone who's come on board, they're very, very new to it, they don't have any strong personal leanings, because you do come across those clients which are, I much prefer carbs to fats, or I really do well with fats. They help with my digestion. I'd like a higher ratio of those. But if you were to start someone off, where are you ballparking their macro breakdown?
Mate, if they're just sort of kicking off and they don't have the greatest field of experience, I mean, if you're pushing their protein up to close to 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, that seems to do the job quite nicely. So you're just getting into your journey, you're just starting in the gym, you're just, starting from scratch. That's a very good spot to be. If you're more of an advanced trainer, you're looking to maximize, increase lean muscle mass, maybe around the 2.5 grams. If you're a competitive bodybuilder looking to push the limits, 3 grams plus, maybe even more when you're in a calorie deficit at the end of a contest prep. So that means that a huge part of the nutritional component is going to be your protein intake. And that's why, cooking meats becomes such an integral part of, I guess, a bodybuilding prep. Then looking at the remaining calories, try to set fats at about maybe 1 gram of fats per kilo of body weight. That's just a ballpark estimate. Certainly can move down from that if someone's in a contest prep, maybe get down to like half a gram of fat per kilo of body weight towards the end of the prep. And then just making up the remainder from carbs, higher fiber carbs if possible. And that will really depend on the total calories that they're running, and that will be sort of based around the individual. But the two metrics that I like to start with is the protein intake, the fat intake, and then just make up the carbs to sort of hit the remaining calories. And that's a pretty good spot to start. Look, with the protein intake, I guess one thing is if your body fat levels are a bit higher, then those targets might be a little bit too high in terms of your protein consumption. So say you're 100 kilos, but you've got a higher amount of body fat, your fat-free mass might be a lower number, and maybe you don't need to hit that 2 grams per kilo of body weight. So it really is an individual thing, but protein first, aim for that fat target and make up the remainder of calories and carbohydrates, aiming for the higher fiber carbs where possible.
Yeah, that's exactly how I do it as well. I find my competitors are so used to consuming protein that it's very, very easy for them to hit 2 grams per kilo. And oftentimes they're exceeding that, especially if they have a large caloric requirement and the incidental protein starts to build up from the veg and the carbohydrates and things like that. And perhaps those are suboptimal amino acid profiles. So in many instances, I have got people eating 3 grams per kilo. But again, I am coaching a largely competitive client base, one that is very accustomed to consuming large amounts of protein and generally does so quite comfortably. But I would always manipulate that carbohydrate, and that carbohydrate requirement is based obviously on metabolic factors, size, age, gender, all that sort of stuff, but so heavily influenced by lifestyle. So my guys that are, working construction or something like that, they might be on, 10 grams of carbs per kilo almost, and others might be on, 3 or 4. So there's a lot of flexibility within that carbohydrates, and that's the main macro that I toggle in order to get the energy balance right while I kind of standardize the protein and the fat requirement. In terms of prep frequency, that's a big one for a lot of people. Now, I am much like you when I'm in a good spot in my prepping lifestyle, and I'm a Sunday afternoon prepper. I feel like it just makes sense. You can have, and I am a prepper of bulk proteins and bulk carbs. I'm not a divider into different meals person, because I want to be able to select them individually and manipulate my portion sizes and perhaps change things up every now and then. So I guess in terms of prepping frequency, you've already hinted you're a Sunday and Wednesday person. I guess if you have lots of free time, you could prep on a near daily basis. The concern with the bulk weekly prep is probably the sustainability. I recently had a client who dropped 8 kilos in the 3 days leading into his show, because he consumed 5-day-old rice, and he got a bug, and he managed to just sit on the toilet and vomit his way onto the stage. And I promise you, he was skinless, Luke, absolutely skinless and dry as a bone. But he was not as impressive as he was at the start of the week, and he did not, ultimately reach his physique goals. So I am kind of concerned about gastro, especially if you've lived in a house with children that have received gastro. It's a traumatic ordeal for any family to go through. So with you're a bi-weekly prepper, you said?
Yeah, for the majority of the time, the bulk gets done. But just as an example, so I cook some chicken breast up or chicken thigh on Sunday, but I pre-season some chicken breast to cook up a day or two later. So I sort of prepare, like I do a lot of the cooking on a Sunday, maybe the Wednesday, and I'll prepare some meats to maybe barbecue later in the week. Barbecue is a very easy way to do it. Same deal as you do carbohydrates as well, rice batch cooking, potato batch cooking, that type of thing. If there is something that I probably spend time with nowadays, especially because I want to try to have the most nutritious diet for the family more than anything else, is preparing fruits and veggies. Fruits and veg I tend to do almost nightly, just so we have some fresh fruit and veg, because that way the little terrors are more inclined to consume that. So definitely the 2 big cook-ups a week are my preference. Mate, I never liked really cooking for the week ahead, purely because how do you keep everything fresh? You tend to have to freeze some of the proteins and carbs for later in the week. They don't always reheat the best after being frozen, especially maybe something like salmon or some whitefish as an example. So I've never really been the biggest fan of the week-long meal prep, but I do get a bit more into prepping meal for meal, just for fun now, Scotty. I'm in the kitchen, the family's just there in the lounge room. I don't mind cooking a nice steak or, just putting in some time and effort for a new dish. That is purely for enjoyment. I would certainly not recommend it for efficiency or anything like that. I'm still a big fan of a meal prep twice a week to sort of get you right through. And mate, one thing about the meal prep and that, how do you do your shopping? Because we've sort of gone now, we get all our meats from the local butcher and our fruit and veg from the local greengrocer, but we're click and collect from Woolworths. It's just so easy. Just click, drive in, open the boot, pick it up. It has made shopping very, very easy, click and collect. Do you utilise that, or home delivery for groceries?
No, we're the most inefficient shoppers in the world. We'll be out and about, and we'll be like, we should go to the shops and get some food while we're here. And then we'll be like, what do we need again? Oh, and you're trying to visualize the fridge and you visualize the pantry, and we'll be like, yeah, I think we need some cereal. I think we need some bagels. And then we'll buy that. And then we'll come home and we'll be like, oh, we forgot milk and eggs. And then we'll head back out at a later date. So no, there's no time efficiency in our approach. My wife is a bargain hunter, and her and her family are very, very big on sourcing the best high quality, cheap bulk proteins. So that is a win. There'll be a little group chat going around where there's, lean lamb backstrap on sale for this price here. I've just purchased 18 kilos because I'm an Arab lady, and when things are available, we've got to get them, and then they'll be divided amongst the family. So that goes down pretty well. But outside of that, no, it's a rather disorderly approach. So we eat a lot of fresh veg. I must admit, we probably eat 3/4 of our veg will be fresh. Same with our fruits. We have the old frozen berries and stuff like that in smoothies. But when I'm prepping for myself, I'm normally just a frozen veg guy. I just find it so easy. Like, and if I just chuck frozen veg in with a meal, which has some protein and some rice or some pasta or something like that, and it'll just defrost over the course of the day, and I cook it up, and it seems to provide a little bit of moisture to the food, and it just makes it all go down well. Yeah, but you're almost exclusively fresh by the sound of it.
Mate, I had a bad relationship with fresh fruit and veggies during my bodybuilding prep. I don't think you could order that from the McDonald's menu. So I didn't get anywhere near enough fresh fruit and veg. And it's a taste preference. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of reheating veg. I like to cook things up fresh. So there's certainly an offset there in terms of time efficiency. But hopefully I'm getting the benefit of, maybe increasing fiber, micronutrients, that type of thing by being more inclined to eat the fruit and veg fresh. So for me, fresh fruit and veg, it's worth the little bit of extra time that I have to put in over the frozen stuff.
Yeah, I think when it comes to palatability and taste and crispness and things like that, especially when you've got kids perhaps that are a little bit reluctant to consume all their vegetables, I think that's certainly a wise move, and that's the way it goes in the household. And an evening fruit platters are very common in our house as well. But yeah, for me personally, I kind of like the convenience of the frozen veg, and it's normally quite affordable. And my understanding is that these days, from a nutritional perspective, it's very much on par with a lot of the fresh stuff when it's snap frozen straight off the vine and things like that. So I think for those of you that are looking to save a little bit of money, save a little bit of time, that perhaps that's a very viable way to go about things. Now, look, I want to get into a topic which I am incredibly passionate about, and I feel like you are not passionate about it. I am irrationally passionate about raw versus cooked weights. Like, it is a bugbear for me and my clients, and I have a lot of clients that are like, can you put that in cooked weights? And I will go on a 10-minute monologue in their feedback video about why I don't like cooked weights, and it's really quite obnoxious. And I've even had one client, and she said to me, so how do you do it? Like, I'm always used to doing it, having cooked weights. So how do you measure it out when it's raw? And I just sent her this totally sarcastic video. I knew she could take it, but I was just like, so what you do, right, instead of cooking it and then weighing it and then eat it, what you do, right, is you weigh it and then you cook it and then you eat it. I'll repeat that for you in case you got lost there. But instead of it weighing it after you cook it, you weigh it before you cook it, and then you cook it, and then you eat it. So it doesn't seem like an overly complicated process to me, but for a lot of people, I get it. It's a very common request because my default is raw weights. A very common request from my clientele is, can you put that in cooked weights? Why am I so reluctant to do this, Luke? Why?
It does present some challenges initially to get your head around, but then it is very simple. Look, Scotty, I was a cooked weight person for pretty much most of my bodybuilding career. That meant I was not accurate with my nutrition as like I could have been. I converted a few years ago to raw weights because it is without a doubt the most accurate way to assess your calorie and macro intake. If you think about, when you cook food, I might cook a chicken breast where I burn it to a crisp. You do one that's beautiful and juicy. They weigh differently, but they were the same weight raw, so they have the same macronutrients. Same deal with rice, potatoes, things or like rice and pasta that holds water, that increases in size. How much water are you putting in? That's going to determine, the end weight to some extent. So raw weight, without a doubt, it is the gold standard for prepping. I often get the same question, and I just relate it back to, say, a kilo of chicken breast. Let's say you're having 200-gram raw portions. So, in that 1 kilo, I've got 5 serves. You cook it up. It doesn't matter what the total weight is after you've cooked it. You just divide that total weight by 5, and there's your 5 portions. So it is the gold standard, especially if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just someone who wants to take your nutrition serious. The other side of the coin is, using cooked weights, because I'm more inclined to keep that up in the long term based on my personal circumstances. Maybe I just want to, eat well. I'm making big changes to my nutrition. I've increased my protein. I'm aiming for higher fiber targets. I'm cutting out ultra processed foods. I have calorie targets in place, but I have a family. And so cooking food for me separately to my family, I'm not going to be able to carry that on in the long term. And for me, the benefit's going to come for being able to sustain this in the long term. So for people with families, and we do it in our house, we just eye off food sizes, and you can weigh it after you cook. And then that means you could cook a kilo of chicken breast, leave it in the one container in the fridge, a kilo of potato, leave it in a container. You've got different fruits and veggies in different containers, and then you just portion it out buffet style at dinner. for families, works really, really well. There's a trade-off. Your nutritional accuracy comes down. However, a lot of people find that this is something that I can sustain. And if I'm eyeing off the same sort of portions and I'm cooking using the same approximate methods, over time, you're sort of keeping things in the ballpark of where you need it to be. So, I think it comes down to the individual. If you're someone who's really serious about your nutrition, it has to be raw. There's no question about that. If you're looking to make some genuine changes and sustain it and maybe take a slightly easier approach, then sort of batch cooking and leaving individual items in containers and serving at mealtime can be very helpful, especially with different taste preferences at home if there's multiple people eating the same food.
Yeah, look, I agree. As much as I'm resistant to the request to put things into cooked weights, I do have some clients that prefer cooked weights for that very reason, and they obviously do so. Now, you can eliminate a lot of the issues with the raw versus cooked debate if you cook it the exact same way every single time. That's just the reality of it, because the amount of weight loss or weight gain to that particular protein or carb or whatever it may be is going to be consistent if the cooking methodology is consistent. I've had an issue in the past with a client who wanted to use cooked weights, and she was having pumpkin in her diet, latter stages of the contest prep, and she was boiling it initially. So she was boiling this pumpkin, and as a result, it was retaining the vast majority, if not all, its weight, because no moisture was being lost. And then she realized, 4 weeks out or whatever, that if I thinly slice it, put some salt, paprika on it, and put it in an air fryer, that 300 grams of pumpkin cooked weight suddenly is so much more satisfying, because she has literally doubled the quantity and doubled the energy yield of that product, because it is now losing the vast majority of its fluid. And certain weights, certain foods can vary significantly with the cooking methodology. Something like a chicken breast, okay, the difference between boiled and thinly sliced and air fried or pan fried or whatever it may be, there might be a 20 to 30% variance. But if you get a moisture rich food like a pumpkin or something like that, it can be a 50% variance. So it does come down to the cooking methods that you use, and if you keep them consistent, it's really not a big issue, despite how I might protest and you're checking feedback. But from the sake of accuracy and doing absolutely everything possible, and also if you want to have the ability to change cooking methodologies, then you can most definitely want to measure it in raw weight. Excuse me. In terms of cooking methods itself, so you're a barbecue man. You're very passionate about your barbecue. I'm an air fryer guy. We've upgraded our air fryer. I don't know how many liters it is, but it's incredibly obtrusive on the kitchen counter, and it's almost too big to get into the kitchen cupboard. So we're big on the air fryer, and I can get in a couple of kilos of meat in that bad boy, and I think it's a really predictable way of cooking. When it comes to your carbohydrate sources, I'm intrigued. How do you go about it?
Mate, I completely agree. Barbecue and air fryer, they are the two weapons of choice for meal prep. Honestly, they make it too easy, and I'm a big fan of both methods. Really mix it up with carbohydrates. I mean, look, we used to have a rice cooker, but going down the rabbit hole of the non-stick surfaces and things like that, we threw that in the bin now. We're doing it in a stainless steel pot. So batch cooking for rice, different types of potatoes, different types of cooking methods. They would probably be the two real staples. Potatoes and rice, probably use it and abuse it too much. But I think that the main thing is the proteins, because that's what tends to be the most difficult sort of component when it comes to nutrition. And mate, the air fryer, like what a tool that would have been back in the day. I'll tell you what, you can cook anything in it. Like fish comes up beautiful, chicken breast, vegetables. Air fryer gets a big tick. It's only it's a second to the barbecue in my opinion, but not too far behind, purely because of the convenience factor.
Mate, I can get a crispy skin on my salmon and still have it pinkish inside of my air fryer. I'm very, very proud of that. What I'm not proud of is the fact that I can't cook rice in a pot, and I'm 100% reliant on my wife to do so. But it's worth it because she's very good at it, and she puts in other little stuff in there as well. I don't know what she puts in there, but it's delicious. So
where do you sit with carbs with like breads?
I love breads. I'm pro gluten. I consume bread on a daily basis, so I would say, as does most of my family. And look, I'm a big believer that Assuming you're not celiac, you're probably fine with a little bit of gluten. I am also a big believer in diversity of food. You should not be wholly and solely reliant on any carb source or any protein source or any fruit or vegetable source for that matter. I love diversity in a food plan, and I think it's the best way to go about things from a sustainability standpoint in terms of long-term health and digestive health and nourishing the gut microbiome and all that sort of stuff. But gluten, dairy, I'm all for it. No issues whatsoever.
Do you have, like, is there a Scott Goble dish that you've done back in the day and still to this day you might pull it out? Is there anything, mate? Do you have a specialty at all? Just one, it doesn't have to be anything amazing, but saying that, it was like your go-to.
It's the saddest meal ever, and it's probably been in that many of the food plans I've written up because for some reason I love chicken, rice, pineapple, barbecue sauce, and a green veg. And it's normally green beans. I do not know why. To me, this is like a tropical delight, and I could probably eat it every day for the rest of my life. And I force a lot of my clients to have it. It's a very stock standard post-workout meal. I'm like, we've got everything in there. We've got high GI carbohydrates. We've got lean proteins. It is the go-to for sure. Yeah, what are you? You're a steak on the barbecue guy for sure.
No, believe it or not, mate. Oats and about 5 eggs into a shaker. Mix it up with a little bit of skim milk, and then throw it in the pan and cook it up and make an oatmeal sort of pancake sort of thing. And then add banana on top, honey, Nutella. You can make it super high calorie. Mate, I've used that since almost the beginning, and still to this day, cook it for the kids, cook it for the family. The old dodgy oatmeal pancake that gets me through.
Yeah, I haven't brought that out since my competing days, to be completely honest. I remember there was many comp preps where I'd have my egg whites and oats fried up in a pan, and I would convince myself that it was actually delicious. And then
has to be whole eggs. Has to be whole eggs.
It does have to be whole eggs. Okay, yeah. Because I would come back to it in an off season, and I'd be like, "What was I thinking? Like this tastes like cardboard." So, whole eggs, a little bit of skim milk. Okay, all right, good to know. I might have to crack it out and give it another go. But are your kids picky eaters? Sorry, Luke, I think you might have missed that one. Are your kids really picky eaters?
So, look, naturally, I think all kids tend to be, but I also think that, or something that I've experienced, your kids really mimic what your parents do as well. And, we're pretty tight with our children's nutrition. We try to limit a lot of ultra-processed foods. We don't restrict it. I mean, there's lollies in the cupboards and they can have snacks and all that, but they really mimic what we do. So they may have had a tendency to be pickier when they're earlier, but because that's the only thing on the table is what mum and dad are eating. They don't have a choice, and they enjoy it. It's interesting. My sister said to Antonio, my son, when he comes down to Sydney, what would you like to eat if you could eat anything at all? What would you pick? And his 2 picks were a tuna wrap from Subway or sushi. She was disgusted. She couldn't believe it wasn't McDonald's or anything like that. So yeah, look, we've kind of pushed our kids into eating a certain way, but they don't know any different, and they enjoy it. So yeah.
Might have to start a separate parenting podcast, and I'll get some advice from you. Mate, let's go over some of the pros and the cons of the different approaches, shall we? When it comes to bulk prepping in advance, probably the biggest pro in my eyes would be just convenience. You get it all done in one shot, and it's all accessible and it's there. The downside would be probably that you have to freeze half of it because it's not going to last the entire week, or you're going to run the gauntlet of getting food poisoning. So, you probably only got 3 or at most 4 days, depending on the food you cook, and the remainder is going to be frozen. And I am not a huge fan of defrosting foods. They're just not quite as good. Any other pros and cons you can think of with the bulk cook up at the start of the week?
I think that's it, mate. It's literally max convenience, max time saving. It is an extreme approach, but because, like you said, food quality drops off at the end of the week.
At least probably flexible approach as well. Like once you've committed to that food, like you don't really have the opportunity to switch it up. So I would think maybe that's almost of a benefit in someone who's in a comp prep where they're not meant to switch it up and you're kind of locked into your food plan regardless. But for those of you that have prefer a more diverse or flavors, you have a palate that responds to different foods and things like that, then perhaps a slightly more flexible approach, or approach where you cook more frequently and you can change things up would be the way to go. For those that want to cook on a super regular basis, I guess it's the almost opposite, isn't it? You've got that flexibility. You can cook whatever you want, but at the same time, when you break it down, if you're cooking every single time with the prep, the cleanup, and everything else that goes with it, you are going to end up spending hours and hours more in the kitchen.
Definitely, definitely. And look, one of the trade-offs there as well is maybe learning about different ways to cook. Maybe you enjoy it. I know since I've stopped my bodybuilding, I've thoroughly enjoyed learning new methods. I kind of think of it as a bit of I'm holding my family to ransom, Scotty, so that my kids will always come back home because they know that, Dad can cook good food, so they're always going to come back. And I'm hoping that it has the same anchoring for Marika, that she won't leave me, in part because of the delicious food that I cook at home. So there's ulterior motives.
Are you the primary cooker of dinner?
I'd say I'm probably do about 70%, and willingly so. I've just carried over all of the habits from bodybuilding, but I now enjoy food, and I enjoy cooking, and I enjoy doing something with my hands, and I really enjoy it. For me, it's not a pain to be cooking. I'm learning and I'm enjoying myself.
I suppose if I only do it like 3 to 4 times a year, that would be 1%, wouldn't it? I think Tanya is 99% responsible for our evening meals.
Wow,
so,
nice.
Yeah, well, she's got me locked in, mate. I'm not going anywhere. So I've really fallen off the bandwagon. Let's, if we want to make things as convenient as possible, we should mention meal prep companies. I did do one bodybuilding prep with a meal prep company where they supplied me with all my raw proteins, or not raw protein, cooked proteins, to be fair. But they even based it off the raw weight because I was that pedantic. So that's an opportunity for some people. And the upside is convenience. The downside is most likely expense. But there are some companies which provide fairly economically viable solutions. Do you ever lean into a My Muscle Chef meal, a U Foods, anything like that?
Mate, I often, on a Monday, and I did it this week, I stop into the local supermarket and I might get 8 meals, and Marika and I will have that for lunch every day. So we, just a meal a day, and there's a whole heap of meal prep taken away. Mate, I'm a big fan. It comes down to the cost part. I mean, I had a bit of a dabble in a meal prep company back in 2012, and mate, the demand was ridiculous. I mean, it was so extreme, the demand, it was actually our demise because we grew so fast, so quickly. Like, it's very, very popular. And so the meal prep companies can give you a significant advantage in terms of time saving if you can balance out those meals across the day. If I'm putting in meals for someone who's eating from a meal prep company, I'll just load those meals in that they want to have, maybe a lunch meal, maybe a dinner, and then I just build out the rest of the day based around those meals, and they just pick a few of the meals that they like to eat, and that's what they'll have for that week. So if you can afford it, it is certainly helpful. The meal prep companies, the quality has improved dramatically. They reheat really well. I mean, there's some new technology they use now where it's not just they vacuum seal it, but I think they put nitrogen in there so that it extends the shelf life of the fridge food. So you can get, something that sits in the fridge for 2 weeks and it still tastes good. You don't have to freeze it. So certainly they have a place. We use it for lunches semi-regularly, and it really helps with the overall load when it comes to meal prep.
Yeah, I've got no affiliation with this company, but the food for fitness meals, which they sell at the bodybuilding shows often, and they sell it here at Doherty's Gym, man, there's some nice briskets and things like that. When you reheat it, it's really, really good quality. So, yeah, these days I'm a much more of a fan of the meal prep companies, I must admit. Back in the day when it was supplied to me free as a sponsorship, I was an even bigger fan, I suppose. But for now, I do see it as a really convenient alternative because for me, man, time is precious. I want to spend as little as time possible prepping food because there is work, there is family, and there isn't much time for anything else in my life. So if I can save time anywhere, it's incredibly valuable to me. And a lot of my busier clients that I guess maybe from a financial perspective aren't under too much stress when it comes to the food side of things, they lean into this a fair bit as well. And I certainly utilize them in other people's food plans. So I guess how will we summarize this one? It is a case of finding what is suitable for you and your lifestyle. Like, firstly, identifying your nutritional targets and putting in place a strategy that works for you. If you've got heaps of free time, cook on a daily basis. Why wouldn't you? It's delicious, it's fresh, it's convenient. You can have all the flexibility of changing up tastes and flavors and spices and marinades or whatever you want to do. If you're incredibly time poor, but perhaps affluent, meal prep company is great. And if you're somewhere in between, do the prep every, once or twice a week. You have the option of creating individual meals and setting them aside, but I think our preference is to go with the bulk proteins, the bulk carbs, maybe some bulk veg, and then just combine it and mix and match as you go. Have you got anything else to add, Luke?
No, we'll just, where do you see protein powders fitting into it all, Scotty?
Good one. Yeah, look, protein powders are a wonderful means of hitting your protein target without the need to meal prep, basically. So for a lot of people, 3 square meals a day is all they want to be cooking, and perhaps all that fits within their work and lifestyle in terms of meal breaks and things like that. So we want them generally to get 4 serves of protein per day to optimize protein synthesis and minimize catabolism. So 3 square meals per day, all coming with protein from whole foods, and then a shake. There you go, 4 serves of protein per day, and you should be maximizing the muscle building benefits. So yeah, big fan of that. Protein bars and cookies and things of that nature are obviously another convenient option. But in terms of like quality protein and with minimal additional calories, I'd say the powders are the way to go.
I'm a big fan, Scotty. WPI, it's hard to go past it. Very bioavailable, digests well, mixes well. You can blend it. I still have 2 50-gram shakes of protein each day, and it just helps so much. If you blend it with, some chia seeds and LSA and berries and maybe a little bit of peanut butter, it's a fantastic superfood. It really is.
Yeah, I'm 100% way for me. I haven't gone to the isolates since my competing days. I've always had a blend. I don't know why. I just prefer it. I think it's like, I don't know, it's texturally superior. Look, I now have a very refined palate like yourself. I think that covers it all, mate. So hopefully some people have got some valuable tips. Hopefully if you haven't got an air fryer, go get yourself one. And please like and subscribe and tune in for the next episode. Thank you.
There's no cure for this one.